The air inside the Athenian courtroom was thick with the smell of sweat, unwashed wool, and cheap wine. 501 citizens sat on stone benches leaning forward. They weren't here for a routine property dispute. They were here to decide the fate of a 70-year-old man with a flattened nose, bulging eyes, and bare, calloused feet. Socrates. To some, he was the conscience of Athens. To others, he was a societal cancer that needed to be cut out. The primary accuser, a wealthy leather tanner named Anytus, stepped up to the speaker's platform. He cleared his throat, wrapping his toga tightly around himself. "Socrates is guilty," Anytus bellowed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "He is guilty of refusing to recognize the gods, recognized by the state, and of introducing other new divinities. He is also guilty of corrupting the youth. The penalty he deserves? Death." The crowd erupted into murmurs. But if you looked closely at the faces of the jurors, you would see that the official charges were a smokescreen. The real reason Socrates was on trial was far more dangerous, far more personal, and deeply tangled in a blood-soaked political betrayal. The art of making everyone feel stupid. To understand why Athens wanted Socrates dead, you have to understand how he spent his Tuesdays. Socrates didn't open a school. He didn't write books. Instead, he walked down to the agora, the bustling public market, and ruined people's days. He practiced what we now call the Socratic method. But to the average Athenian, it just felt like being intellectually dismantled in public. He would approach a revered politician and ask a seemingly simple question: "What is justice?" The politician, eager to look wise in front of a crowd, would give a standard answer. Socrates would nod thoughtfully and then ask a follow-up question. Then another. Then another. Within 10 minutes, the politician would contradict himself, trap himself in his own logic, and stand exposed as a complete fraud before a laughing crowd of onlookers. Socrates did this to generals, priests, poets, and craftsmen. He claimed he knew nothing at all, which made him the wisest man in Athens, because everyone else knew nothing, but thought they knew everything. While the elite grew to hate him with a burning passion, the teenage boys of Athens's wealthiest families absolutely loved it. They followed Socrates around like a rock star, mimicking his style and going home to use his interrogation tactics on their angry fathers. But annoying the upper class isn't usually a capital offense. Something else had pushed Athens over the edge: the traitor in the classroom. A few years before the trial, Athens had suffered a catastrophic, humiliating defeat in the Peloponnesian War against Sparta. The empire was gone. The democracy had been temporarily overthrown by a brutal, Spartan-backed oligarchy known as the 30 Tyrants. During their brief, terrifying reign, the 30 Tyrants executed roughly 1,500 democratic citizens and stole their property. Athens was a city suffering from severe post-traumatic stress. When democracy was finally restored, the citizens were looking for someone to blame. They couldn't punish all the tyrants because a general amnesty had been declared to prevent an endless civil war. But they could look at the man who had educated them. The leader of the 30 Tyrants? Critias, a former student of Socrates, the most famous traitor in Athenian history, a brilliant but unhinged general named Alcibiades, who had defected to Sparta and helped destroy the Athenian navy. Socrates' favorite, most intimate disciple. The jury didn't look at Socrates and see a harmless, eccentric philosopher. They looked at him and saw the ideological incubator for the monsters who had broken their city. They believed his constant questioning of traditional values, authority, and democracy had stripped these young men of their patriotism, turning them into ruthless sociopaths. The trial. The ultimate backfire. Back in the courtroom, it was Socrates' turn to speak. Under Athenian law, a defendant had the right to make a counterproposal for their punishment. If the prosecution asked for death, the defendant would usually suggest exile or a heavy fine. The jury would almost always opt for the milder punishment. Honor would be satisfied, and everyone would go home. Athens didn't actually want to kill Socrates. They wanted him to shut up, pack his bags, and leave. But Socrates refused to play the game. He stood before the 501 jurors, completely unbothered by the threat of execution. He told them that he was a gift sent by the gods to Athens. He compared the city to a great noble horse that had grown sluggish and lazy. He, Socrates, was the gadfly, the annoying horsefly sent to sting it into action and keep it awake. Then came the moment that sealed his fate. He was asked to propose his alternative punishment to death. Socrates paused, looked at the jury, and essentially said, "Considering what I've done for this city, I think my true punishment should be free meals for life in the Prytaneum, the banquet hall reserved for Olympic heroes." The jury was stunned. It was the ultimate arrogant sting of the gadfly. He wasn't begging for mercy. He was demanding a reward for irritating them. When the final votes were cast into the urns, the verdict was clear. Socrates was sentenced to die by drinking hemlock. The final plot twist. The story should end there, but Socrates had one final surprise for Athens. Because of a religious festival, Socrates' execution was delayed for a month. During this time, he was kept in a low-security prison. His wealthy friends, devastated by the verdict, easily bribed the guards. They walked into Socrates' cell with a foolproof escape plan. A boat was waiting. He could flee to another city, live out his days in comfort, and keep teaching. It was the perfect getaway. But Socrates looked at his friends and smiled. He refused to go. He argued that he had lived in Athens his whole life, enjoying the protection and benefits of its laws. To break the law now, just because it had turned against him, would be hypocritical and unjust. He believed that an unjust death was better than committing an unjust act to save one's own skin. On the day of his execution, surrounded by weeping friends, Socrates took the cup of ground-up hemlock from the executioner. He asked if it was permissible to pour out a small drink offering to the gods, but the executioner told him there was only just enough poison in the cup to do the job. Socrates nodded, drank the bitter liquid calmly, and lay down as his legs began to grow cold and numb. His final words were strangely ordinary. "Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please remember to pay the debt." Asclepius was the god of healing. Socrates viewed death not as an end, but as a cure for the burdens of the mortal world. Athens got exactly what it wanted. The annoying fly was dead. But in killing him, they inadvertently granted him immortality. By refusing to run, Socrates became history's first intellectual martyr, ensuring that his questions would echo loudly across Western civilization for the next 2,500 years.